Hello, friends and allies. Welcome to the very first episode of Common Voices, a new podcast presented by Allied Voices for Israel. I'm your host, Justin Chow. I'm a Chinese ally of the Jewish community, and throughout our podcast, you'll join us on a journey as we embark on a search for people who embody human values that transcend our differences. And understand that the way we make change happen is by coming together and sharing our stories and ideas with one another. We'll dive into all sorts of topics like Jewish allyship, Israel advocacy, but also getting a sneak peek into all kinds of other communities who may be marginalized and definitely deserve to have a platform where they can voice their truth. Our aim ultimately is to create meaningful conversations, empower everyday individuals like you with tools that you can apply to your own life, and bring some clarity to issues that are often very misunderstood. With all that out of the way, I'm very excited to introduce you to our first guest of the podcast. We have Amy Albertson in the studio today. She's an incredible Chinese Jewish advocate and educator from sunny California. She created her Instagram account, The Asian Israeli, now renamed The Amy Albertson, when she lived in Israel for 6 years and learned all about her identity and Israeli history. And her work online and offline reaches thousands of people every day. Amy, we are so happy to have you here. How are you feeling today?
I'm good. I'm, a little tired. We had a great event in Toronto yesterday, and but I'm so honored to be here, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Truly, it's such a pleasure to have you join us because, even as someone who, just got involved with Jewish advocacy since 10/7 and getting to know all the influencers online and everyone that's been involved in this world for much longer than, since 10/7. It's very, very inspiring to see all the work that you guys have already done. So as a start, could you tell us a bit about your journey of becoming an advocate? How did it start? Was there a moment or an event that made you realize, oh yeah, this is what I want to do?
Sure. So I think we can go back, hopefully not too far back, but essentially I think some of my background is important for that story. And
Absolutely.
As you mentioned, I'm Chinese American and Jewish, and I grew up in a mixed family in Sacramento, California. And I grew up in I always describe it as sort of Jewish upbringing. I didn't have that typical Jewish American experience that I think a lot of other Jewish Americans have. I didn't go to camp. I wasn't ever affiliated with a synagogue or anything like that. My parents were very, very open to me exploring whatever I wanted, but I always knew I was Chinese and Jewish. And if anyone asked me, what are you? I was Chinese and Jewish. And I grew up celebrating Jewish holidays and Christmas and this kind of stuff in the American context. It was not religious in any way for my family. And for the Jewish holidays and everything we did that was Jewish, it was a bit different because my grandma she lives in Berkeley, and she's a self-proclaimed atheist Jew.
Oh, wow.
So she really doesn't like organized religion, but she definitely is a proud Jewish woman, and being Jewish that's her culture. That's what she grew up with. So I grew up with things like we did Passover every year, but we didn't read a Haggadah. We read this other book that was secular that just told the story of Passover. And I didn't even know a Haggadah existed until I went to college. So that was kind of my upbringing. And it wasn't until college that I took sort of more concrete steps to explore and learn about my Jewish identity and who are the Jewish people and all of this. And so a few things happened kind of simultaneously. One, I started at Hillel, which from talking to you, I think that's also kind of where you started, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can talk about that.
Yeah.
as well.
And so I started at Hillel. That was my first kind of place to go as a student on college campus, and I quickly became the vice president. I was always someone to get really involved. And then what happened is that my college brought Israel programming because we had an Israeli shaliach, which for those who don't know what shaliach is, it loosely translates to emissary, and they're Israelis from usually like the Jewish agency that they send all over the world to communities to create connections with Israel in various ways. So we got a shaliach. He brought this documentary to our school, and it was protested. And I was like so confused. I was like, what's going on? And people were saying, oh, you know, they're protesting the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I had never heard the word Palestinian. I didn't know there was a conflict. All I knew about Israel growing up was Israel is a country. It's the Jewish country. There are countries all over the world with different religions, or like America, which has allegedly no religion. That can be debated. And so I didn't understand that people could have a problem with this one Jewish country. And so I immediately told our shaliach, like, okay, I need to learn all about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Like, what is this? In that, like, after that incident, also our Hillel didn't want to touch the subject of Israel. And even though I still obviously did not know hardly anything, for me, I was like, something isn't right here. Like, if the Jewish group isn't going to address Israel, like, who's going to address Israel?
Exactly.
And so, you know, to make a long story short, I ended up starting an Israel group. That incident was really like the spark that lit the fire. So from then on, I just kind of became obsessed with learning everything about Israel, not only about the conflict, but also like I was meeting, you know, Israelis for the first time, and I wanted to know more, like the music, the culture, the food, all these things, the history, and also the politics and the conflict. Fast forward quite a bit, I did end up making Aliyah, and I lived in Israel for 6 years. I lived there from 2015 to 2021. And that's when I started my online presence as the Asian Israeli, as you mentioned. The Asian Israeli was like a much more lifestyle type account. And it was a lot of like, these are the cool restaurants we have in Israel. This is the beach. I'm going there on Shabbat. And look at, you know, the old city of Jerusalem and all these things. And so it was a little more fun. Not that what I do online doesn't also include fun, but it was much more about that. It was much more about my experience as an Ola, as an immigrant, especially being Chinese American in Israel, because there aren't that many Asian people in Israel.
I can imagine.
And and then when I moved back to the United States during COVID, May of 2021 happened, and this was the Sheikh Jarrah incident in Israel, and we just saw the crazy amounts, like high volumes of misinformation and antisemitism online. And so, you know, when I had moved back to America, I was wondering what's going to happen to the Asian Israeli. I changed my name, and I was like, are my followers just going to disappear because I'm no longer in Israel? And that's what they followed me for. So I guess, you know, like Hashem answered my question with this incident. And that's when I kind of went into like direct advocacy mode.
I see. Wow. What an incredible story. You've come very far.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm curious, how was your 6 years in Israel? How was that?
Being in Israel was incredible. But I will say, like, living in Israel, especially as someone like an American, you don't make Aliyah to Israel. Well, it's a little bit different now, but it's not necessarily out of necessity, right? We have a lot of other immigrant communities from different diaspora communities, such as from the former Soviet Union or the Ethiopian Jews, or from other Middle Eastern countries where like they literally cannot exist as Jews where they are, or they just have no opportunities and they have to move to Israel. That's their only option.
Yeah, they don't have a choice. Yeah.
For American Jews, especially at the time that I went, it's very much an ideological choice. So it's not that you're going to have an easier or I don't want to say not better life, but there's a lot of things that are really difficult. You are an immigrant. You are learning a new language. You are in a different culture and society and all of these things. And I think people underestimate just how Middle Eastern Israel is. Like, it is in the Middle East, and it is very Middle Eastern. I think it's definitely where East and Western cultures kind of mesh and meet. Yeah. So on that level, it was, there were a lot of difficulties. But then also, like, Jewishly, it was so amazing. So, like, the trajectory of my Jewish identity and exploration, the time that I moved to Israel, it was just really great for me to be able to explore my Jewish identity in this context. And one of the reasons is because the Jewish Israeli mindset of how you exist as a Jew is so, so different than that of America.
Yeah. Let's get into that.
Yeah.
Because I'm very curious.
Yeah. So the first time I actually really understood this was I was on my birthright trip. So the first time I went to Israel was on birthright in 2013.
I see.
And our madricha, our like leader of our group, asked us to get into partners and tell each other what our first Jewish memory was. And I was really lucky to be paired up with one of our Israelis, one of the soldiers, and he was like, I'm so confused by this question. He was like, I am a Jewish man and I live in the Jewish country, and so like all my memories are Jewish. Like, I'm not sure I really understand the question. And the madricha was kind of explaining, like, like a holiday or a thing where you were doing something Jewish. And he was like, I just, when you describe it that way, I think my first Jewish memory would be like, I went to synagogue with my dad when I was a kid and I hated going. Because I think it's like they say like 80% of Israelis are secular. And so in America, I think a lot, and this is probably true for a lot of diaspora communities, that you only feel Jewish when you're doing Jewish. And for someone like me who grew up not doing Jewish in the same way that a lot of these other people were doing it growing up, I always felt behind. Like, oh, I don't know the prayers. I don't know the things yet. Like, I haven't learned all of that, like, deep religious or that kind of stuff. And I was still learning a lot. So I felt inadequate. So it felt really comfortable to live in a place like Israel where I was just Jewish because I existed as a Jewish human.
Yeah.
And that really switched it in my mind and made me feel a lot less inadequate. So I think it was really such a great environment to explore my Judaism in, my Jewish identity. And I actually started off living in Jerusalem.
Oh, really?
Which people are always so surprised to hear, because you think like, oh, everyone in Jerusalem is super religious and like, how could you be accepted and all these things. And interestingly enough, like, it was great to be surrounded by a lot of friends who were on some sort of spectrum of orthodoxy, but in this mindset of we're all Jewish all the time, living in a Jewish society, being Jewish people. So I learned so much from being with them in that context. And then, of course, I did eventually move to Tel Aviv because I was like, why do I live in Israel and not by the beach?
Exactly. I mean, you get the hot weather, but like, well, if you're not by the beach, like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I was like, what am I doing here? But yeah, so it was a great place for my Jewish development, I think.
That's amazing. I mean, I have heard from others that, like, Jewishness is very different depending on the context you're in, the
100%.
communities that have like developed in the place that you're in, like, because these places have had like many decades and hundreds of years of like history already because of the amount of times that Jews have been kicked out of Israel. So like, it only makes sense that Jewishness in America is like so different from how it is like actually in Israel proper. And it's also fascinating to hear that when you were in America that, you felt inadequate in terms of your Jewishness. And like, it was only when you returned and like, went to Israel that you saw that it was just, this is everything around me is Jewish. There's no differentiation between Jewish and like kind of, not Jewish.
Exactly. It was like a wake-up call for me because I did experience being a Jewish person in America the same way, like more closely to the way Israelis thought of themselves as Jews, because like for me, like I said, my grandma was an atheist. Like it wasn't about religion for her. It was literally like that's our culture, that's our ethnicity. Like her parents came from Russia, but they weren't like Russian by culture. Like none of the culture she was taught was Russian. It was Jewish. Like my grandma spoke Yiddish with her parents, not Russian, and these kinds of things. So it was just so interesting where American Jews a lot of times would tell me things like, oh, if you didn't do this or that, or you're not a member of a synagogue, or you're not, doing basically religious things, then like you're not really Jewish. And really, I think it's like, no, actually you have taken on what America has put on you by classifying being Jewish as only a religion when it's not only a religion. That is like, I always like to tell people, Judaism is the religion of the Jewish people, of the Jewish nation, of the land of Israel. But Judaism, the religion, is not the only thing we have. It's not only who we are, right? So it just was so interesting that once I was in, the Jewish homeland, like everyone here was really operating more under that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's a kind of a good segue into, discovering other facets of your identity that, you can explore as, as all the kinds of identities that you hold, as Amy, like being in America and having people tell you that you're not Jewish enough or you're not a good Jew. I'm very curious how that has manifested in terms of your Chinese identity as well.
Sure.
Like how have people perceived you as Jewish, or are you Chinese? Are you Jewish? Like, I don't think I've ever seen a Chinese Jew before in America. Do they really exist? Like what has been your experience so far?
Sure. Yeah. So it's really interesting because I actually grew up. So Sacramento, California, where I grew up, is actually very diverse, and I really took this for granted until I went to college in Portland, Oregon, where it's 95% white people. But so one thing was being in a mixed family, especially a mixed Asian and something else family, was not rare where I grew up. Like a lot of my friends were mixed, and so I never thought twice about it until I was like away from that. So that's one thing. The other thing is being Chinese. A lot of people know what it means to be Chinese, and so I didn't really need to ever explain that to anything. Whereas being Jewish, the average non-Jewish person either hasn't met a Jew or doesn't know that they've met a Jew, and they really don't know anything about Jews. And in fact, most of what they might know about Jews is probably even anti-Semitic.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's part of why or how I ended up kind of diving deeper into maybe my Jewish heritage or my Jewish identity than my Chinese identity, because it was just out of necessity. And then the other thing is my Chinese family is actually more generations American than my Jewish family. My Chinese side, so on my Chinese side, I'm third and fourth generation American, and my Chinese family is quite assimilated, whether that's good or bad. Like I didn't learn Chinese. My mom, she'll refuse to admit that she speaks Chinese, but she didn't really teach me Chinese other than bad things that she didn't want other people to know what she's saying, or like when she's telling me to shut up. Or my grandma taught me how to order ice water because Chinese people don't drink
That's so cute.
ice water at the Chinese restaurant, and she was like, I don't want to keep ordering you ice water. Like you can order that for yourself.
Oh my gosh, that's adorable.
So things like this, and it's just like so even my Chinese, I always clarify to people I'm Chinese American. And I think also people are like, well, why aren't you interested in the country of China? And I'm like, because it's not the same sort of the way the culture is, and the connection with the land of China. That's not a thing, right? It's not.
Nobody refers it.
There's not a China. I mean, I guess people have co-opted this term, like the Chinese diaspora or the Asian diaspora, because by definition of like being outside of the original place you came from is a diaspora, but it's not the same concept of like the Jewish peoplehood and connection to this homeland. And also, different. I think I find a lot of, I can't speak for everyone's origin story or their family stories, but a lot of Asian immigrants came to America or came to Canada or left their Asian countries as refugees and immigrants, and it's not in a way of like they want to return there. That like concept of return isn't inherent in the culture or something like that. So it wasn't like a value that was ever, you know, told to me or something like that. There's not a like a land back movement that I'm aware of for Chinese people.
I haven't heard of it before.
Yeah, like it's just not it's not a one-to-one kind of thing. So yeah, I think those are like the ways that I kind of have ended up kind of doing the thing I do now.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to
Yeah.
that immigrant bit a little bit, since like I myself am first generation immigrant. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have any family here in Canada, but you know, like my dad accompanied me at first, like when I moved here for school. But like he was gone after 2 weeks, like after helping me move into my dorm and like buying me stuff from Walmart and
Wow.
all that. But yeah, like afterwards, like I had to navigate like everything on my own. But it was for kind of a good reason, because you know, in the past 5 to 8 years, Hong Kong has been going through some very chaotic political times, and a lot of loss of freedoms, of freedom of the press, freedom of expression. Yeah, like it's people are careful about what they say back home these days, whereas when I was younger, like you didn't really have to do that. You could just, if you had an opinion about the government, you could talk about it openly. But nowadays, like if you offend the Chinese government in any way, like out in public, you could very well get arrested. Yeah, so it's not looking good back home. And so, to your point about it being a difference between like, Jews who have a like an imperative to go back to Israel, and that being a very, very much a massive part of Jewish identity, and like Zionism as well. For me, I have no wish to go back.
Exactly. I think it's really this difference of like, at least for China, right? Because it's very Asia is huge and complicated, and there's lots of different people and cultures and ethnicities and all these things. But to speak to China as like what you're telling me is, it's the choice of wanting to leave that place versus the Jewish people did not want to leave Israel ever. We have just continuously been kicked out. So
Killed, expelled.
And now we're returning to where we came from, and we never wanted to leave in the first place. So it is a difference. Like that kind of mentality is very different, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's no comparison there. It's such different cultures, languages, contexts. It's very different. I kind of want to talk about we spoke about this offline. You mentioned seeing Asian or even like Chinese groups and activists online actually being quite anti-Israel and falling for propaganda and all that, like on social media. Like you sent me stuff that I've seen. It's mind-blowing, like the amount how deep they've fallen like in this hole. Can you talk about like what you've seen them like say or do, or even people you've seen like in person in real life?
Sure. So during COVID, we had big movements of we had a lot of increase in anti-Asian racism and a lot of incidents. Especially, I now live in the Bay Area, and which is heavily Asian, and so a lot of that was happening there. And I started following a lot of different Asian activists who were addressing Asian hate, and then come 10/7, and starting even October 8th, October 9th, I'm seeing them posting, hey, everyone, like free Palestine, and here's why. And trying to make what are very false equivalencies and connections to, the Asian plight and the legacy of Asian activism in America to this free Palestine movement. And that was very hard because I obviously admired these people for their work. They were doing great work as far as it was concerned for the Asian hate movement. And then here we are, and they're peddling anti-Semitic rhetoric and Islamic imperialism, and it was pretty upsetting. There was one
Yeah, of
particular
course.
activist who, should I name her?
Ooh.
Michelle Kim.
There she
She
is.
recently she had published a book in the year before that was about, social justice, racism, and all these things, which I think are very important conversations to have, obviously. And October, I think it was October 9th, that she had posted a carousel of all these, free Palestine, the occupation, the usual talking points.
Yeah.
And I commented and I said, and I really wanted to be respectful. I wanted to engage her in dialogue. And I said, I'm a fan of your work. I really have admired everything you've done. And I just don't know if maybe you don't know that there are Asian Jews, but like what you're posting right now, aside from, this isn't my exact words, obviously, but like aside from, being untrue, beside that, like you're very much ignoring a part of your community that you say that you want to fight for and represent, that you're saying that Asian Americans and Asians should all be supporting this other side, this other movement, and you're ignoring that there are Asian Jews.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And so for me, that was like really hard, especially because she responded to me by saying, if you were familiar with my work, you would know that this
dear.
is why
Oh,
I
no.
must speak up this way.
Oh no.
And for me, that was just like,
Just a
so
kick in
that
your
was
gut.
like, yeah, that was horrible. It was like, it was very condescending.
Uh-huh.
And obviously it was like, you obviously don't give a shit about me. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss on here.
No, I mean, hey, it's a conversation. It's a casual conversation.
Yeah.
Why not? Why not?
Yeah, so it was things like that, and I've seen, more and more of it. I think I sent you a post that was pretty recent, but they've been doing
Yeah.
this the entire, we're almost at a year now. An organization called 8 Million Rising. Again, another organization addressing anti-Asian hate. And this video is full of, we can call it dog whistles, but really they're basically yelling, saying things like the Zionist money. And they've even changed their profile to say no Zionism. So they're literally like focusing their entire activity on becoming anti-Israel, which, I don't know if we need to define this for everyone here, but being anti-Zionist is anti-Semitic. So you're literally taking this organization that is supposed to be helping Asians in America, but now your entire focus is literally anti-Semitic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have lots of things that I want to kind of dissect there, but I guess for just our listeners, as a good foundation, I feel like it's kind of crucial that we define like what Zionism really is.
Yeah.
Because with all these groups that have all these misconceptions, and we'll go back into Michelle's work.
Sure.
And we'll kind of because I'm very curious like how like that betrayal that you feel, like I even hearing that story, like I feel betrayed.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like I didn't expect her to become an Israel advocate by any mean, but to not be willing to acknowledge that Asian Jews are part of the community
That exists.
and that we exist. I mean, she said, yes, of course I know Asian Jews, which, okay, fine, that's great. I'm glad I don't have to teach you that part. But but it almost makes it worse because it's like, if you know Asian Jews exist, then you would know that, if you knew Asian Jews exist and you knew what Zionism actually is and you knew what Israel was actually like, then you would know that what you're saying is untrue, harmful, and anti-Semitic.
Exactly. It's so going back to the definition, Zionism is, and please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Zionism is there are many kinds of Zionisms, political Zionism, religious Zionism. In Israel, there's many parties that represent different kinds of Zionism as well. But the most agreed upon definition among advocates is that it's the movement towards having a Jewish homeland in the land of Israel and to have self-determination there for the Jewish people, because that has been something that's been lost for such a long time that people forget that Jews are indigenous to Israel.
Exactly.
And Zionism is the indigenous movement of the Middle East. Truly.
Yeah, it's the only, exactly. So yes, that's a great definition of Zionism. I usually tell people, like, I don't care where on the spectrum
Mm-hmm.
of Zionism you fall, but
Mm-hmm.
the basic definition, and this has been so hijacked and
Mm-hmm.
so what do you call it? I can't think of the word, but
Co-opted.
co-opted and so
Twisted.
yeah, all these words. Sorry, should have had more coffee. But yes, the definition of Zionism has been co-opted and changed and redefined. And at the end of the day, Zionism is exactly what you said. It is literally the belief that the Jewish people, like any other nation, have the right to self-determination. And I personally think that it is crucial to also acknowledge that it is in our indigenous homeland. Anything beyond that is up for debate. And so when someone says, no, Zionism is colonialism, it is a policy of removing people from, removing Palestinians from this land, like, that is not true. Yes, there are Zionists who maybe hold that belief, but that is not what Zionism is. It is up for debate. And so that's where it also comes into that tricky area of, like, are you criticizing an Israeli policy or something that is happening or has happened in the history of the establishment of Israel or, since the establishment of Israel? Or are you just against Jews having a homeland in our indigenous homeland? Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. And what a lot of these, I kind of like to see them as like post 10-7 advocates, but on the wrong side of history. What they don't understand or what they've been led to believe is that, like, all these things that we've just spoken about Zionism, like, we're either gaslighted into thinking that that's not it. Jews are not indigenous to Israel. It's Palestinians. It's Jews are white colonizers that from Europe, from Poland, go back to Poland. And these people, they believe these things. They believe these things because there are, I've seen a lot of, like, influence from bad actors, like bad governments, bad regimes, like in the Middle East, that are trying to influence a lot of the public opinion over here. And it is unfortunate that, that propaganda, because it is, let's name it that.
Yes,
let's call it that. It is straight up Soviet era propaganda, that it's reaching, people like me, like Gen Z, like people in their early 20s who are in their prime age for, like, absorbing information, learning about the world, interacting with different kinds of people. And yet that opportunity is being taken advantage of by people who want to spread violent, Islamic imperialism throughout the entire world. And people don't see that. And people see Zionism, which is, again, an indigenous movement, and Israel as the most successful, indigenous, land back movement, pretty much in the entire world, as, like, bad. As, no, you are colonizers. You are, Israel is an apartheid state. You're oppressing Palestinians. But no, like, when you really look deeper, we are trying to do exactly the things that you want to do as well. Like, we want to give everyone a chance to have an opportunity to, like, have freedom, have a good life here, to be able to live with their family, live with their loved ones here in the land where they've been. And we don't need to kick anyone into the sea or do anything to them to have that result. We can have a dialogue. We don't, Michelle doesn't have to cancel you and, like, completely ignore you because she has a misconstrued definition of Zionism and thereby thinks that, oh, you're Jewish. Ew.
Yeah, exactly. And even if she says things like she has no problems with, I mean, she hasn't said any of these things, so Michelle, don't come for me. I don't want a letter from your lawyer. I mean, I haven't been watching your content lately, so maybe you have said these things, but it's not, and it's also these, the thing of, I don't hate Jews, I just hate Zionists. Well, first of all, statistically, if you look at any study that's been done of the Jewish people, which I'll admit we need to do more and we need more updated studies, but the majority of the Jewish people, you can see it quoted between 80 to 95% of Jews are Zionists. So, okay, you don't hate all Jews, you just hate most of the Jews. The other thing I always ask people is, are you against all nation states?
Exactly.
And some people will say yes, in which case I guess that means they're an anarchist, but like, are you really an anarchist? Because where in this world do you think you're gonna go? And so that's a double standard against the Jewish people. And one of the best tests I always tell people for anything to know if it's anti-Semitic is Natan Sharansky's 3Ds.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, these are the best, and it's such a basic tool. It's the 3Ds are demonization, delegitimization, and double standard. And so basically you can take any talking point from any of these people and put it under this litmus test. And so, yeah, anti-Zionism is a double standard. And that's anti-Semitic.
It is. And I've even heard people, commenting on the term anti-Semitism and saying that, no, Arabs are also Semites, so we can't be anti-Semitic.
Oh, no.
So it's no matter what, you can't win.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a quick Google search that you can do to find, what does anti-Semitic mean? What does Semitic mean? Semitic is not a type of people. It's a group of languages. Just Google it. I don't even need to waste time here.
Truly. No, yeah, and that's the thing as well. People are getting their information from, frankly, really bad sources.
Yeah.
Al Jazeera is not a good source of factual information coming from the Middle East.
No, it's Qatari state news. It's propaganda.
Exactly. And yet people fall for it. Even it's not just Al Jazeera, it's CNN, it's regular news outlets that we think we can trust. It's content creators on Instagram, on TikTok that that a lot of people my generation see as inspirations and people that they truly, believe are they look up to them. And rightfully so, because perhaps these people do hold values in their life that they want to model after, and yet in this one realm they are blatantly hateful and people fall for these lies. It's unfortunate to see. Yeah,
and so to talk to this issue of social media and how misinformation is spreading and all these things. So we saw, this has been going on for a while, but I always like to make the difference between someone who is, and even this exists in the Jewish world, right? So I'll use that as an example, not to project it on anyone else, but there's a difference between a Jewish influencer or advocate online versus an influencer who is Jewish. And so that goes for anything. And what I mean by that is I am a Jewish influencer. My entire online presence has always been on this topic of educating people of, Jewish diversity, Jewish pluralism, about Israel, and these kinds of things. And then there are other people who, and I'm not saying they're any less valid, but you have to remember that not everyone is an educator or an advocate necessarily. They might have been a fashion influencer, a body positivity influencer, a singer, any of these things. And then they saw this need to advocate for Israel. And that's great. I don't want to discourage any of these people. But I think it goes into that thing of we saw all of these other influencers who are just, we see it in the fashion community. We see it in the body positivity movement. We see it in literally any realm, So this girl who sells you makeup after 10/7 is getting bombarded by her followers to say something about Palestine, but she doesn't know anything about Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw so many videos in the months after October 7th
Mm-hmm.
of exactly these people who came on with their video. So I wasn't going to say anything because I just didn't feel educated enough on the subject. So I did some research and it's going to be free Palestine for me. And I'm like, honey, this is one of the most complicated geopolitical conflicts in the world. Reading 3 articles and watching 2 TikToks is not enough research for you to make a statement. Stay in your lane.
Amen.
It's just ridiculous to me. And then, little Jennifer, who idolizes this girl,
Mm-hmm.
is like, oh, she said free Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
She did her research.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, free Palestine. And not to get on a tangent, but even this rhetoric of free Palestine or pro-Palestinian is so misleading because I am pro-Palestinian.
Mm-hmm.
I also want the Palestinian people to have rights and dignity and all the things that all human beings deserve.
Mm-hmm.
But the Free Palestine movement is not based in the development of a Palestinian state or the development of Palestinian society. It is based in the destruction of the Jewish state.
Precisely.
Because if it was based in building anything, they would already have it. Yesterday at the event, Debbie Roots Metals was also there, and she mentioned something that I didn't ever even think about, which was that 1945, the Holocaust ends. Obviously, the Jewish people are in the lowest low point that they've ever been in, and she brought up the fact that this is something I never even thought about, that then 1948, just a few years later, we were able to declare independence in Israel, and that is incredible.
Beautiful.
And that's only 3 years after we were literally having an actual genocide of Jewish people. And why is that? And that is because for years and years, decades, even over 100 years before the establishment of the State of Israel, Jews had been trying to return to Israel, to establish a state, doing all kinds of the things that you need to do in order to gain a state, going through diplomatic means, building different aspects of society to establish a country, versus what we have in quote unquote Palestine, which would be, Israel gives Gaza back in 2005 unilaterally. They didn't ask. We said, here, have it. Create something for yourself. And what happened? Hamas came in and had alleged elections, a violent coup. And here we are. So, it's just, I could go on.
No, yeah, I mean, this is the place to go on. But I hear you. It's and I absolutely resonate with what you mentioned about Debbie, saying last night about the Jewish people like being so resilient, like after basically the great depression of the Jewish people, the Holocaust, and yet 3 years later you made a state for yourself. And then shortly after, you were invaded again.
Yeah.
And the war started.
Simultaneously, really.
Yeah. And then you won. Like, by just, it's a miracle. It's a miracle.
It really is.
Israel is a miracle, and the Jewish people are a miracle. And it's unfortunate that people don't see that. And, people who are in, like, I just graduated from U of T, so I went through 4 years of undergrad there, and I studied religion, psychology, bit of gender studies as well. And there was a through line of this narrative that, like, you need to see this world and very clear there is a power divide between the people who are in power and the people who are oppressed, who are everyday, sufferers of capitalism, of billionaires, of all these things, all these atrocities in the entire world. And in order for us to get to the world that we want to see, we want to live in, we need to do something like violent. We need to rise up against those in power. And it's unfortunate that that narrative has invaded so many young minds and has corrupted their lens of even being able to see that from like you, from a Chinese American Jew, that you have these identities, and they could talk to you if they want to know more about the history of Israel, the history of the Jewish people, and yet they see that as, no, you're a colonizer. Israel is a colonizer state, and because the Arabs are brown and Jews are white, I'm going to help the Arabs, no matter if it means, Hamas has raped women, Israeli women, no matter whether, how many babies they've killed, no matter how many
matters.
Yeah, truly. So it's mind-boggling that they are so deeply entrenched and they cannot see past, or they don't even have the willingness to take the next step and like question what they see and then take the next step and be like, are there any other sources of information that are going to give me like more than just this same narrative of intifada, genocide, apartheid, Israel is, as a colonizer state, Jews are white. Like, you're repeating, do you notice that you're parroting the same exact arguments? Like, people are in a trance, if that's what it feels like.
Yeah, and to go even, and to take it into the specific context of, the Asian American community that, and I will say from my observation and interactions, it is much more of this younger generation that falls into this trap. But when you take that oppressed versus oppressor narrative that is being pushed so hard literally everywhere in society at this point, and they're putting Jews in the oppressor column, I think a lot of these Asian activists are either forgetting or just looking past the fact that Asian Americans are called the model minority. We have also been put in the successful minority category, in which case we are not the oppressed. When you look at things like affirmative action, it tries to exclude Asians because Asians are statistically very successful in America. They're going to college at high rates, much more than other minorities. Therefore, they're not considered oppressed or needing help, which is crazy because, one, that paints a monolithic picture of what is literally the biggest, I think, community on the earth. Like Asians, I think, are the highest population on the earth.
I think so.
And so it's painting a monolith of the community. Also, it's putting you in this proximity to whiteness, which is exactly what this movement is trying to do to Jewish people, right? Like you said, they're trying to characterize us as white colonizers, which is wrong for so many reasons. And so it really is very frustrating to watch, of all of the activist communities, the Asian American activist community not understand that this is also what, on some level, is happening for us as well. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, put two and two together. Like, there, I just did it for you. Listen to this podcast.
Precisely, exactly. Yeah, like, listen to sources of information like this. Listen to people who have been to Israel. Listen to people who have these stories, who have these personal stories, and not Al Jazeera, not your, the social media like influencer that you follow who used to do nails and now they're like
an expert in the Middle East.
Yeah. Like, it's that the places and the opportunities to seek out that information are there, and you have the power to find that. And
I think, and we talked about this a little bit offline, is what is it psychologically or also in academia where it's like I was taught and you were taught, but newer generations and things like this in academia and things, they're not taught to think critically, right? So they're not thinking that they need to look past these sources and anything that they've already heard, they can't take in anything else. And so even when you send, so for example, my husband, he's he's Black. He doesn't identify as African American, I don't think. He's a Black man in America, and he has started to get into, even though I tell him not to do this, some comment exchanges, we'll call them, some debates, and even sometimes DMs, and he'll send them things like, Ethiopian Jews like Ashagar Arero and things like this, literally saying online, stop telling me as an Ethiopian Jew, as a black woman in Israel, what my life is like. And they still will come back at him and say, that's really interesting, but I just don't understand how she can feel more Jewish than Ethiopian. And it's like, well, listen to her. Just like, even if you can't understand it because maybe that's not your experience, she is telling you her life experience as not only just from living that, she's also highly educated on the subject. This is her job. This is her life. And you just can't accept it because you were told this other thing and your brain just like cannot compute. And so that's also a huge issue.
No, absolutely. Like the critical thinking piece, it's funny because like I went to university.
Yeah.
To some extent, like I was taught critical thinking. I was taught to look for multiple sources of information and like even in those sources of information, analyze like critically and scrutinize everything you see and question everything you see. But then I think that there's so much like there's a lot of incentive to not be critical as well. There's the incentive to belong, to fit in to your social group, to feel like, oh, I'm part of something bigger than myself. And for people who are in this kind of age bracket, like it makes sense. You want to belong to a larger family, a larger movement. You want to feel like you're doing something or making a difference in this world. But then when you see, and it's hard when you're, say you're in university and you're being taught by your professor, like all these things about like history and politics, and you do see them as like the authority of all that information. But then if you don't take that, again, extra step and be like, wait a minute, I don't think that's right. And I don't agree with all of you keffiyeh wearing people here. And I want to say something. And I want to, speak for myself. I don't want to just follow the crowd. No matter if it's my professor, if it's my parents, if it's my culture, religion, whatever, I don't care. I want to seek out the truth for myself. And I think that is what is missing from a lot of people's lives, people's minds, people's attitudes towards life right now, like especially if you're younger, is that like people are not relying on the fact that they can also think for themselves. And that's an important part of learning. Like our institutions are there for a reason, and they need to be there. But then at the same time, you need to have that in combination with your own sense of the world. And you can disagree with what your professor says. You can disagree with what all these academics say, with what this random influencer says. Like you can question, you can disagree. And that's also, I think part of, based on my observations, it's a very part and parcel of American culture to be politically correct.
Yes, this is a huge problem. Yeah, and I will say, that was also a thing about like living. Israel needs to move a little towards the political correctness to an extent. And America really is so stuck in this political correctness where it's like, you can't say anything because you might offend someone. And it's a two-way street, right? It's like, okay, yeah, don't say offensive things, but also people need to not be offended by everything. Like not everything someone says to you is meant to offend you. And we're humans, we make mistakes. So if someone says something to you and that's not right and you didn't like that, just tell them in a nice way. And then if they do react to that in a poor way, then okay, yeah, like you should be offended. But it's just like this assumption that anything anyone is saying is, they're out to get me. And then what I wanted to say to what you were talking about this idea of that you can question, right? So what we see in the Free Palestine movement, right? We saw this with the encampments. It's built into the movement not to question. You cannot speak to outsiders. You know, whenever someone would come to the encampments to ask questions, they had designated people who were trained in the talking points to talk to the media, to outsiders, and everyone else was told, do not speak to anyone else. Why? Because they could come in and tell you something that might make you question what I told you in here. And you could only go in there if you weren't going to question anything. And that is just so telling in and of itself. Personally, I would be really freaked out to be a part of something like that.
Yeah, rightfully so.
And I mean, you can tell me if it goes, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, since you came into this, you know, only post October 7th, like the Jewish or the pro-Israel community, like, we are not like that. Ask us questions. We want you to ask us questions. We want you to be interested, to understand the facts, to know what it's like. That's why we take so many people to Israel. They say, oh, they're taking you to Israel to brainwash you. It's like, no, we're taking you to Israel because we want you to see it with your own eyes. Right?
Exactly.
Like, see it with your own eyes, because we're not hiding some nefarious thing. And so I think that's a huge thing to see, that, you know, one side is over here telling you, like, don't ask any questions, read the talking points, parrot the talking points. And the other side is like, yeah, come ask us questions. Come talk to us. Come see it for yourself and make your own conclusions.
Exactly. And to add to that, it's such a big part of Jewish culture to debate, to have discussions, to have different interpretations of the Torah.
That's literally how we study our texts, by essentially arguing with each other constantly. Like,
that's part of it.
That's what the Talmud is. It's commentaries. It's like literally different rabbis debating with each other. And so, you know, it's inherent to our culture.
That's the strength of the culture, right? It's because you allow change to happen. You don't stay completely static in the same exact beliefs, or, you know, things that worked before, and you're, you know, with some
some
exclusions.
We have some issues in there, but
to, you know, to a more general extent, I think there is more openness. There's more willingness to change according to the times. And if there is, you know, a new need rises, okay, let me use a different tool. This tool that I used to fix this problem probably isn't going to work for this because it's rusty, it's broken, you know, it doesn't fit. Let me use a different one. Let me use a new one. But then people who don't do that, and you can, you know, you can feel this. You can like, and I really don't understand how people like don't question when they are in these spaces and they're fed these lies, and they're not for 1 second they're like, oh, I don't like this. Maybe I should do some of my own research. No, they keep coming back.
Well, then they're also shamed and told you're racist, you're Islamophobic, you're whatever if you question that. And so that's where, you know, especially in America, and I don't know if it's this way in Canada, but the PC thing comes into play, where it's like, God forbid you're accused of being a racist. But then that's also where this double standard thing comes in, because people seem to be very okay with being called an anti-Semite.
No, truly. Yeah, like, people are completely fine with being told that, like, hey, what you're saying to Jews, you are basically denying an entire group of indigenous people their right to live in their homeland, their right to even exist, their right to
safety. Yeah.
To, like, let alone trust in others. Yeah. You know? And, like, that's also one of the biggest things that I've observed since 10/7. It's unfortunate, but, you know, it's kind of the reality is that, like, Jews have been oppressed for and like persecuted and just gaslit for so long that it's difficult when someone who's not within the community comes in and, you know, says, hey, I want to help and I want to do something about this. It's, you know, it's understandable that, like, you would be kind of suspicious about that, because everyone else has been like, No, you don't deserve to have a homeland. No, you don't deserve to exist. You know?
I would actually love to. I know this is your podcast and you're asking the questions, but I would love to pose this question since this is the Allied Voices for Israel podcast, because this is something that has been a challenge for me because I understand, like you said, like it comes from intergenerational trauma, literally built in, and the sign of the times of this a little bit of a paranoia sometimes, I think, and at the end of the day, Jews are so small in this world, and we, for better or for worse, we need our allies. And I understand that we have to be weary because there are people that are literally out to get us. But I would love to know from your perspective, having come into this kind of newer and with your experiences, like, are there any things that you would want to say to Jewish people who are very weary of new people coming in? Like, is there something they could be doing better or differently, or the attitude, whether it's an attitude or the way they question you or any of these things, or maybe it's even like, you know, from your perspective, an initiative that they should be doing to go out to allied communities or things like, or potential allied communities. Like, I don't know, just like, is there something that you could give that advice?
I mean, a couple of things. Like my main goal and the main thing that I wanted to do when I first started getting into this work was to just be there with everyone who was suffering and in so much pain, because I knew that, like, I can't stop Hamas. I can't stop the rockets, unfortunately. I would love to. I can't stop Iran.
Come on, Justin.
Do more. But like, I know I can't necessarily save the entire world. But at the very least, I can just be there with someone in their pain, whether they're grieving, they're angry, they're frustrated, whatever. I can listen. I can be empathetic towards what they're feeling. I can remain, I don't have to intrude. I can just offer up myself as someone who is available for, hey, if you want to talk about this, I want to learn. I want to learn about what's happened to your friends, to your family, because this sounds really, really tough. And I cannot imagine the amount of pain you're in right now. At the very least, if I can't take away the pain, I want to be there in the pain with you. And that has been my one focus throughout all my work. Like, in every Jewish community or like congregation or like person that I interact to, like, that's the energy that I try to convey to them, is that, like, I would love to be able to change everything, but I can't. But at least I can hear your story. I can listen to your history, where you came from, what you've gone through. I can learn about something new. I'm very curious. I'd love to learn about like new things and new cultures, new people that I've never encountered before. I think that's also part of like why I've I'm doing this, and why it's been so, like, I wouldn't say easy, but like I'm passionate about it. It's that, like, I'm open-minded to new things. I'm open to new possibilities. And I think that's something that people, at home can take away as well, is that things are tough, to say the least. Understatement of the century. But things will change. And things change no matter what. We've, look at the history of Israel, look at the history of the Jews, and you see, even, again, like what we mentioned earlier, in 3 years, the Jews went from their lowest low to their highest high. And we had 10-7, and things are still pretty shitty right now, both in Israel, but also around the world. But things will change. And people, I hope, will change their minds. People will slowly learn what the truth is. The truth, it reveals itself over time. And yeah, like, it's when we fall into those traps of feeling like we're stuck forever in the state that we're in, that you start to close off. You start to go into fight or flight. You don't believe that the world is good, or that there are good people out there. When the reality is that your neighbor next door could be someone a new friend. Your friend that you haven't spoken to in a while, maybe they, you reach out to them and tell them that like you're going through a tough time and they're happy to be there for you. But then if you believe that the world is dark and stuck and everyone hates us, everyone hates me, you're not going to want to take those actions to, seek out the help you need, or even believe, like, for example, for me, that people not involved in the community could be a source of support.
Yeah.
But it's possible. And, I'm an example of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very hard to balance the fear, which is very legitimate, with the ability to be open to the possibility of people existing like you. So yeah, I hear it's very hard, but I guess I've always been the kind of person who's like what you described, where it's like, okay, I'm gonna talk to that person, and if it goes badly, I know, but like I can't just write people off from the get-go. But I understand it's hard, and especially now when, not that mental safety is less important than physical safety, but like, yeah, I'm not trying to get assaulted. So I understand how people can be really fearful of like people trying to come in and things like that. But at the end of the day, we need our allies. So
definitely, and
something to work on.
You deserve your allies, and that's that's why I do the work that I do. That's why I work. So
that's why you work at Allied Voices for Israel.
Yeah, there you go. There's the plug. Yeah. So yeah, this work, I'm gonna keep doing it. I'm not going anywhere. I want to keep doing this. Keep being, even if for now it's me and maybe a couple of others that are allies of the community. Hopefully, eventually, in a couple of months, maybe a year, there will be many more. Many, many more. It won't just be me doing this podcast. There'll be many others.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I always say to people, I hope that one day, even though this is bad for me, that our work will be obsolete, right? Because people would stop hating Jews so much, and Israel could live in peace and all these things. But, for now, we'll keep doing the work.
For now. Yeah. Okay. All right. We're nearing the end of our episode, but I kind of want to, end it on a lighter note.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm going to give you some rapid fire questions.
Amazing. I love it.
And you let me know, what you think, and like just come up with, just say the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay,
first
sure.
Thing that comes to mind. In a few words.
Yeah.
How would your friends describe you?
Funny. I'm very funny. At least I think I'm funny. I actually did some stand-up comedy in Israel.
Oh, yeah. No way.
That's another story. But so funny, probably like empathetic. And I don't know, I'm also like a little cuckoo. Like I'm a little neurotic, but I think a lot of people, we're all like ADHD generation. And also I think like, a lot of Jews we're a little neurotic from all the things, from the intergenerational trauma, the living in the shtetls, the everything. Yeah. So yeah, I'm also a little like you can't see that on our podcast, but I'm just shaking my head rapidly. Yeah, I think that's how people would describe me.
I see. I love that. Everyone's a little bit, has their own baggage. And
also, people say I'm organized, which like I am to an extent. I think I'm really organized with like other people's things, but like with my own things, it's a little less organized.
And that's okay.
But yeah,
that's okay. You channel that energy towards others, help others. Help yourself once in a while as well.
Yeah,
but
like,
yeah. Okay, what's one misconception about you that people often have?
I mean, obviously that I'm Jewish. Like most people see me and I'm very Asian presenting. People always ask me like, are you afraid to wear, your Magen David or your Israel stuff or your Jewish stuff? And I'm like, so far, knock on wood, I have not been like hate crimed or anything, because I think people see me and they see me wearing Jewish symbols and they just have no idea what to do with me. They're like just very confused because most people don't know that Asian Jews exist. So yeah, I think the number one misconception is that I'm Jewish.
Yeah, they want to like profile you, like Chinese, Jew, Chinese and Jew.
Yeah, like does not compute. Yeah.
It's like blue screen error.
Yeah.
Favorite place in Israel?
That's very hard. the sea, like being being on the beach, being in the Mediterranean Sea. It could be anywhere. I mean, Tel Aviv is obviously a great place, and that's where I lived. But like, go to Ashkelon to the sea, go up north to the sea. So beautiful, so amazing.
It's along the entire
Like,
coast. Yeah.
I think my like happy, peaceful place is like floating in the Mediterranean Sea.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I know that feeling.
Yeah. And then
absolutely.
Hakosem for falafel and schnitzel.
Ooh.
And I like the sabik there. Some traditionalists don't, but I like it because it's like this large slice of eggplant.
Yeah.
And I love it.
We love eggplant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you never had sabik?
I've never had.
You know what it is?
I don't know.
So
Not really.
it's an Israeli thing, but it comes from I believe it's a Tunisian Israeli who created it.
Oh, okay.
And it's fried eggplant in a pita with like, traditionally it has like potato and boiled egg, but it also has like hummus and all the stuff that they put in like a shawarma. And so it's like, it's delicious.
Okay, I'll definitely have to try. I mean, I've never been to Israel, but
we're gonna work on that too.
Yes, please, please. I would love to visit. Last one. Favorite Chinese food
In life?
in life, or in the places you've been, Israel. Who knows?
Okay, so that's also hard because I feel like it depends on my mood, what kind of Chinese food I want to eat. But I guess like my family, like a go-to thing is chow fun is like definitely something I really like. And obviously like dim sum, I love some dumplings.
Plenty of dim sum.
And then as far as Israel is concerned, like don't. I'm sorry, Israel, I love you. So many great things that you do and have done, but like the Chinese food there is bad. The only place I could say that you could maybe get Chinese food in Israel is in Neve Sha'anan, which is a South Tel Aviv neighborhood that people think is scary, but I'm telling you now it's not scary because it tends to be a lot more like a lot of like Sudanese and Eritrean refugees, and it's near the central bus station in Tel Aviv, which has a bad reputation.
I see.
But it's really not. It's fine. It's fine. But there is like this place there that is Chinese people that run it, and they make like baos and chasiu and all these things. But they're not. It's one of those places where it's like the sign on the door can say like be back at any time, and it's just like you never know when it's open, you don't know when it's open. So it's a little unpredictable.
I see.
But otherwise I would not eat Chinese food in Israel. Just like wait till you get back to literally anywhere else.
I mean, you guys have pretty good Chinese food in like California as well.
Oh yeah, where I live, like tons of amazing Asian food of different varieties. So it's okay.
We're pretty privileged in terms of like in the diaspora, Chinese food in like Toronto and like California, I think we're pretty good.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Amy, for coming on the podcast. This was an incredible conversation. I feel so honored to even like be just still like, after an hour talking to each other, like to see you in person, like in the same space after seeing you online on Instagram. And like I see your stories of like putting the hostage numbers and like on your chest as well, like seeing that every day, and then having you and having this incredible conversation was like, it was inspiring, truly. And I'm sure a lot of our viewers and listeners are also plenty inspired. So yeah, thank you so much. If you would like to plug any current projects or, your social media, upcoming events and stuff like that, the floor is yours.
Sure. I mean, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for you and your organization's work. As I said, we need our allies, so that's great. And then, as far as finding me, I'm at the Amy Albertson, AMYALBERTSON on Instagram mostly, but I'm also technically on TikTok and Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. Not my favorite places, but I am on there, and anyone is welcome to slide into the DMs. I try to get to all of them as much as I can.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, I'm sure you'll see plenty of new followers. Yeah. And to everyone watching or listening, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Common Voices. We hope this conversation gave you something to take home and apply in your own life. Learn some critical thinking skills, question what you see, And yeah, there's hope out there because there's, people like me, allies who do care, And if you want to find out more about, the work that we do here at AVI, as allies and coalition building and all that, please feel free to follow us at Allied Voices for Israel on most social media platforms. And yeah, that's it for today. Thank you again, Amy.
Thank you.